and then trying it. And it totally worked. It
After
totally
years of that.
worked. And I haven't had a drink for almost a year. And more importantly, I haven't wanted to. I haven't thought about it except for 2 times. And neither time did it sound appealing for more than 5 seconds.
Wow.
And neither time was I grieving the fact that I couldn't have it.
Welcome, everybody. It's Katie with Embody Daily, and today I am here with a special guest. Her name is Lindsey, and I'm really excited to have Lindsey here because she is going to tell us about her experience and success with the Sinclair Method at addressing problematic drinking. So, Lindsey, first, just thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thanks so much for asking me to come talk with you. I'm so excited to talk to you about this.
Yeah. Today. I know we had a coaching session and you've come to some of the TSM meetups, and I just love the way you tell your story. Like, you have a great sense of humor, and just the way you tell it is really interesting. So I'm excited to kind of dive into some of the questions I have for you today. You want to just start by telling us a bit about your history with alcohol use?
Yeah, so I started drinking really young. I was 12 years old. I'm 48 now, so and I stopped drinking. It'll be a year ago in 2 weeks, so I'm jumping ahead just a little bit there. But I started when I was 12, and I drank for quite a long time. So, and it really progressed in college. Kind of at that time when it does for a lot of people, I think. And I went to school at a small liberal arts college here in Minnesota. And there was a dry campus, meaning there was supposed to be no booze on campus, but it was kind of, everyone knew what was happening. Obviously, the recycling bins and all the dorm halls were full of empty bottles and cans. Everyone knew it. So we did a lot of drinking in our dorm rooms, and while we studied even, and I enjoyed that a lot. And then after college, I continued to drink. And I was struggling with, at the time, in retrospect, and I was aware of it at the time too, was just kind of acclimating to life as a young adult, having just graduated from school and really being disappointed at the amount of money I was making, and, living in this kind of shabby apartment. But I loved to socialize and party with my friends who like to party like I did. And drugs are part of my story also, but nothing really stayed with me as long. Nothing at all stayed with me as long as alcohol did. And I remember kind of feeling like maybe I had an issue in my early 20s and being aware of it, but sort of laughing it off with my friends because the thought of quitting was so scary to me. I was just like, I can't even think about that. So I just didn't. And then I continued to drink through my 20s. I first went to rehab in 2000. It was July of 2000, so about 21 years ago. And it was a 12-step based place. I didn't know that before I went. I guess I didn't do my due diligence. I came home to Minnesota. I didn't really have any quote unquote consequences yet. I hadn't lost a job. I hadn't had any kind of legal consequences. And I also hadn't, but I was blacking out, and I had fainted at work once and had a seizure. So there was that. But other than that, I was sort of like, well, but I did want to get better. I did want to quit. I came home from San Francisco, where I was living, to call off a wedding. And it was a really abrupt thing. And I got home and my parents were like, what's going on? And I started to talk about it. And they asked me if I'd been drinking a lot. And I said, yes. And they said, well, why don't you go to rehab? And I said, great. So I did. And pretty quickly learned, you're put into a medical unit for the first 3 days where people detox. Some people are given detox drugs like Librium and things like that. I didn't go in. I had had just a glass of wine the night before as a test. My parents were like, let's see if you can do it. Just one. Let's see if you can do it. And I was like, I'm going to do it. So I did. But as a result, I didn't go in needing to detox. And on that unit, you're kind of just left to yourself. They bring food to you. You're allowed to just sort of decompress. But then you get down to the unit, and within a few minutes, I realized I was in a 12-step program, and I thought, oh no. And I really, right from the beginning, I thought, oh no, this is not what I bargained for. And I spoke to the counselors about it, and they're ready for people like that. They're trained for resistance, because it is the abstinence model is so scary for people, and as a result, people don't seek help, myself included. So, and also, not to mention, the 12-step model is not effective for a lot of people. So it was something I was just like, oh no, what am I going to do? And then they just tell you things like, you're defiant and you're unwilling, and you're loud. You just kind of have a big mouth. And what do you want? And then you tell them, and they say, ha, what you want is, you don't even know what's good for you. Your best thinking got you here, and what you want isn't what's best for you. And they sort of, and it's like, and I realized that I was up against something. And also my parents had been spoken to by the counselors as well, who scared them a lot. I mean, there's a lot of fear there, and fear creates panic for people. So I didn't feel like I could really say anything, because they would say things like, you're not unique. We've seen this so many times before. And unless you sit down and stop talking and take that cotton out of your ears and put it into your mouth, then you're never gonna learn anything. And I just thought, okay, maybe there's some truth to that. I'll open my mind and become willing. But it never sunk in, and then you're the problem, not the program. And also the other thing too is I didn't realize until later, maybe that same day that I'd spoken to the counselors, that everyone else in the treatment center, almost everyone else in the unit I was in, had been there before. And so they all heard that speech already, the one I just got, where I was called names and told I was an egomaniac with an inferiority complex, things like that. And I don't want to bash 12-step programs, because I did glean some good things from them, but I struggled with it a lot, and I didn't stay sober. I was told to go to AA meetings. I went to sober living, and because abstinence is how they measure success, I felt the need to lie about being sober when I wasn't, because if I didn't lie about it, I would lose my housing, because I was in sober housing. And then I would have to go to rehab again, meaning I would lose my job, things like that. And then once the legal consequences started happening, I got DWIs, multiple. Then you really have to keep any use a secret. Well, first of all, if you're using drugs or anything that stays in your system for more than a couple days, they're going to catch you. But you can also kind of finagle around that a little bit. But you don't tell people in your life. You don't know who you can trust. And you certainly don't want the law finding out, because you'll go to jail for violating probation. So it all became very complicated, and I learned to just keep it a secret. And because I kept my inability to stay sober a secret, I internalized a lot of bad feelings, and a lot of the messages that I was told in that rehab center kind of got in, even though I was like, that is not true. They kind of got in there. And so I started to feel bad and lie, and then binge drink a lot, because I was trying to hide it. So for example, I would go out to dinner with friends who thought I was sober, because I said I was sober, because I was actively lying about using, drinking, but I would have a bottle of booze in my purse. Okay, and everyone would be having a nice dinner, and I would be sneaking off to the bathroom and swigging. And when you know that you can't go to the bathroom too much during a meal, or people will start wondering what's going on, you get to that booze, you get in the bathroom, and it was like gurgle, 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 gurgle. So many. I would drink half the bottle. So, and of course I would get drunk and people would be like, what is going on? And so it was really, and I went to treatment many times over the course of 20 years. I went back to that same treatment center 2 more times. One of those times was an extended stay of 6 months. And every treatment center that I went to, and then of course, once you start getting legal issues and you are court ordered to go to rehab, they were all 12-step based. And I just knew something was missing. And I was super frightened because I felt as though my brain was working against me. That anyone who's struggled with addiction understands that feeling of being one's own worst enemy. And it's super scary. And I was right about that. It turns out I learned about the Sinclair Method and I was like, oh, my brain is working against me because of the way it is. That's just the way it works. When you engage in a behavior that releases endorphins, these neural pathways are strengthened and it happens. So you just got to reverse it. But I was never told about it. I did a lot of therapy. And then I started to, so that's kind of in a nutshell, that's sort of my drinking story. And I came across the Sinclair Method. Oh, and also in 2000, when I first went to rehab, they put me on Naltrexone as a daily thing. And I was like, this isn't working, by the way. And they're like, and I did have side effects then, and I'll get into this in a little bit. When I did the Sinclair Method, I didn't experience some of the side effects I've heard people talk about in those daily support meetings. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but I did feel side effects when I was taking it daily. Now, I'm someone who struggled with depression, and I was at an all-time low at that point. And so, unbeknownst to me, because I didn't look into it, again, no due diligence. I was kind of like, whatever you say. Wow. So I was told that's how it worked. Like, you just need to surrender and listen and do what we say.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like, okay, like, I didn't know what else to do. Like, but I knew something was amiss. But I knew I had a tough crowd in front of me too. So I just kind of kept everything secret. Anyway, I didn't realize that it was blocking all my feel goods, my endorphins, all those opiates all the time when I was taking it daily. So that makes sense as to why I was feeling blue, or I had, I believe it did affect my appetite too, but I was fine with that, frankly, which is a whole nother conversation. But I didn't learn about the Sinclair Method until just a few years ago. I came across that documentary, One Little Pill.
Yeah.
And I watched it. And I thought, is this true? I was like, no way. And all that stuff that I'd heard through 20 years of trying. Now, I did do meetings. I did do AA meetings during those 20 years, off and on, mostly off, to be honest. It's hard to want to do something that doesn't feel like it's working. It's hard to stay motivated. And so I didn't do meetings, and I found actually that I did better and was able to maintain more days of, excuse me, I'm gonna have to plug in my phone really quick and probably move my position. So where was I? Oh, 20 years, and I tried AA, and I was really never into it. And I didn't want to be that person at the meetings. I was like, this sucks. I don't like this. This program does not work. Like, just, if you don't like it, don't do it. But there is a little bit of an edge to it where it's like, yeah, but if you don't do it, then you're going to relapse, see, because you keep relapsing. So even though I knew that wasn't really true, it had gotten in there into my subconscious. And again, that was subconscious. It wasn't even something I really even thought about until right before I started the Sinclair Method as well. I became aware of those subconscious thoughts that drove drinking, and other things that I've learned in the meantime. But I just didn't know anything. And I was stuck in a cycle of addiction and I couldn't make decisions. And it was right about like the willpower piece. It is really tough to do it with willpower. They weren't correct about the why. It's not because I'm an egotistical person who just can't take instruction properly. It's because I sometimes lose my train of thought also. And sometimes I think it's because I'm older. But let's see, what was I saying about
AA was right about the willpower, but
right, it's because we only have so much willpower in our body and our brain stores every day. And when you use all of it up before you even leave for work in the morning, because you're making the decision to not drink every single day instead of just making the decision and committing to it and doing it, or my mornings were always very harried and I had to pick out an outfit and decide whether I was going to wear this or do this, or how late could I make it before I had to leave for the train to get to work. And my mornings were just always crazy, and they have been my whole life. And unbeknownst to me, all of my willpower had been used up before I left for work in the morning. So that's why willpower doesn't work. So I became aware of subconscious thinking. And then when I saw the Sinclair Method, I thought, this is amazing. Now, I didn't do it for a few years. And then I came across the documentary again. This was after I had read a book that I found really helpful. I don't know, can I say other publications?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I read This Naked Mind.
Yeah.
Which was recommended to me by a bartender, by the way.
I love it.
I know. It was really helpful. And I thought the information was interesting and I believed it to be true. But for me, I was like, I don't think it's enough. However, this pattern is so ingrained in my mind, and I don't have the capability to fight my brain every day, nor should I have to. Like, we're born with this brain and it's amazing. And if you learn about it on a really basic level, you can change things,
That's so true.
And it's pretty simple stuff. It's not, the science behind it isn't the difficult part. It wasn't for me. It was that indoctrination of this abstinence model that got into my brain, even though I knew it didn't work, and there was major parts missing.
Yeah.
Namely, that all of us are actually unique. We all have our own individual experiences. And that there are common things that manifest with addiction through people, but the reasons behind those are different.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and more complex. It's more nuanced. And I think the abstinence model just keeps it really simple. People don't like to think about that complicated stuff, I think, myself included sometimes. Just keep it simple, it's easier. That black and white thinking is sometimes easier. Well, it's also detrimental, I think, because it's just not true. And also, my point is, it's not that complicated. I understood it after watching the Sinclair Method, or the One Little Pill movie once. It was like, oh, that makes sense. And then reading about it more, watching that documentary again, and then trying it. And it totally worked. It totally worked. And I haven't had a drink for almost a year. And more importantly, I haven't wanted to. I haven't thought about it, except for 2 times. And neither time did it sound appealing for more than 5 seconds.
Wow.
And neither time was I grieving the fact that I couldn't have it. And
Wow.
therein lies the beauty, because I didn't have the fight in me to, and no one who does have the fight in them to reverse, very firmly established neural pathways in their brain through behavioral stuff like, no, and I believe in changing habits and being cognizant of your goals and intentions, but just, it's not, you can't fight it. And so with naltrexone, you can, and it's not a fight, by the way. For me, it wasn't. I mean, I didn't share my experience with anyone while I was going through it, and not even my therapist. And I wish I had, but I really bumped up against I experience had shown me that I would bump up against resistance from people who cared about me and people I cared about.
Because it's so unconventional. They're like, you're drinking to stop drinking? Like, no, that's not how it works.
And it's counterintuitive. But then also for me, it was about being like, yeah, but it's really none of your business what I'm doing or how I'm doing this. And just because you don't like the idea of harm reduction, because it's more nuanced and complicated than just quitting, doesn't mean that it's the way that works. Just because it's the way you want it to work and you want it to be, and you've been told all these years that it is. These people who love me and who I love have also been misinformed. It's not their fault. But I do run into some rigidity with people now. I have slowly started telling people, I've talked to my therapist about it. And a lot of the secrecy with her was still tied up in that goofy abstinence model stuff of your success is really contingent upon you staying sober for how many days, how many weeks, how many months at a time. And it became clear to me that I was like, I need to talk to someone about this and have someone help me through this experience, because again, I had already quit drinking by then and reached pharmacological extinction. But because it's a really interesting process and a lot of people don't know about it. It's super interesting process. And I realize obviously, and I knew it when I was doing it, talk about counterintuitive. Lying or withholding information to your therapist. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on, man. And she, unbeknownst to me, I met her when I was in a court-ordered treatment, and then I continued on with her. And then once she left that place, I still didn't tell her. She was no longer, I completed all the stuff I needed to complete. She was no longer mandated to report to anyone about my behavior, but I was still really protective of it. I also wanted to make sure it worked, but it has felt so different. It's amazing. And I got a prescription from the person who I get antidepressants from, a psychiatrist. And I'd started taking those regularly, which was obviously really helpful. And I started doing the Sinclair Method in secret, but I did things that I was supposed to do. Like I charted my drinks and I journaled about my drinking experiences and how I was feeling. Writing for me is really helpful way to process stuff. So, and going back and reading those journal entries is really interesting too. When I first started it, I dropped from 30 drinks a week, like 20 to 30 drinks a week, to like cut in half immediately. And immediately noticed I decided that I didn't want to, I'd always drank in secret. Like I said, it started early. When I started drinking at 12, I wasn't out socially drinking in bars. I was like sitting in my walk-in closet, drinking a wine cooler.
Going to the bathroom of the restaurant.
Yeah. What?
Going to the bathroom of the restaurant when you were out with your friends.
And then I was like 35. Like, what?
I used to love to drink in secret too, so I'm laughing with you here.
I know. It's but part of my deal was I was like, I better not drink in private anymore, because I was concerned also about safety. I was like, I could hurt myself. I live alone, and I moved into this new house and it's really tiny. It's the size of a matchbox, but I opened the door that goes down to the basement and I looked at the bottom of the stairs and I said, I'm gonna die at the bottom of those if I don't quit drinking. And that was super real to me. I said it kind of jokingly, I think. I don't know who was here. It might have been my realtor even. He knows me because he's an old family friend. But it was really not funny. I was honestly scared of that. I was like, so I would go to bars, and that's the first time I took Naltrexone. I went to a bar and I took the pill an hour before I was to drink, and my craving for drinking had dissipated quickly within that hour, like within the first 5 minutes. But I was like, okay, Lindsey, now it says you got to drink when you're on it for it to work. And I understood that. And guess what? I don't have to explain that to anyone. Like I'm an adult and I can make decisions for myself based on my experiences and I understand my limitations. So I said, that whole notion of, well, of course you're going to do this because you get to drink on it. I'm trying to get help to stop drinking. And my intention was not to drink like a normal person. My intention was to become abstinent. But so I knew I needed to drink for it to work. So I went to a bar and I got there and I kind of wandered in and, it's dark in there in the middle of the day. And I ordered a beer and it was, like 3 p.m. or something like that. Not really done with work yet, but okay. And I was in the pub club or whatever. So my pint got automatically upgraded to like this giant mug thing. And the bartender who knew me and was friendly, you usually would hand me this drink and I would intercept it and just like right to the mouth, like bowl of ramen. But I didn't. And I was like, she paused for a second and I sort of motioned like, you can set it down. And she did. And that beer sat there for like 10 minutes. Now I was like on my phone and stuff like that, but that's not normal. Like that's not at all my usual experience then and there. And I noticed quickly that the bar was kind of annoying. Like it smelled weird and the TV shows were super annoying. And just me and the same people as it is every day that I go in there. And the whole experience, and I didn't finish my beer. Also, that never happens. Now it's a brewery, right? So it had this weird kind of hoppy smell in the place that I'd never really noticed either. It was kind of unpleasant. And just the whole scene was just kind of like, ugh. I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't getting that same endorphin rush. And that in and of itself was super exciting to me. And I went home and I didn't drink anymore and I didn't think about drinking. And that was like that day I felt for the first time in my life, like there's hope here. There's hope here. I can't believe this. And then, so that was November of 2019.
Okay, so almost 2 full years ago from today. Okay.
Well, what would it be, like a year and 8 months or something like that?
Yeah.
Yes. So, and then by March of 2020, all the bars and restaurants closed because of COVID. So my plan to only not drink at home was thwarted. So I drank at home. By this time, I was 4 months in, and my drinking, like I said, had already been cut in half. And I was plateaued kind of at like about 8 to 10 drinks a week. And that was usually over 2 days. So I wasn't drinking every day. It was generally like 1 to 2 days a week. By the end, it was usually 1 day. So 8 drinks in a week would happen in one night. So that was still binging. And I was just drinking beer. I had switched from like the stronger beers that I liked to now I preferred just regular beer, like lagers. And then I eventually went to those super disgusting spiked seltzers that are a headache in a can, that are really low alcohol, or like 5% or something like that.
A headache in a can. I love
They're terrible. But I drank the whole 12-pack. That one just was spread out over more days, actually. Okay. They're disgusting. Yeah.
They became popular like right when I quit drinking, so I never got to enjoy them.
You're not missing anything. Even Zima, which was popular when I was like in my early 20s, it was like this clear Swedish, but not Swedish, like this Sweden, but sweet-ish drink. But even that was malt liquor and it was way stronger. But anyway, I digress. And so I was drinking at home then. And then still charting everything, kind of had plateaued, was worried a little bit. But I knew because I'd started watching your videos also, by the way. Thank you. They were so helpful. I found your YouTube channel.
Thank you.
Watch those. Yes.
That's awesome.
All those tips and tricks were super helpful. And I didn't drink hard liquor like you had mentioned, but I wasn't anyway. Like I kind of stopped drinking hard liquor over the years. I just had lost interest in it. So, and I was really at a place mentally where I was ready to just honestly look at this and say, all right, you need to look at the facts in front of you and see if it's true. And if the science is right, and if it works, give it a try. I was a little apprehensive. I was afraid it might not work. And I'm sure you hear that a lot.
Definitely.
It's kind of like, this is my last chance.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was really mentally ready for it. And I do think it would have been more helpful for me to have been talking to someone through the process. In hindsight, I chose not to do it that way, and it still worked. And it was relatively painless. There were times that I look back in the journal and I was struggling. There were some dark days in there, but I never blacked out. I blacked out once after starting the Sinclair Method only. And I used to black out regularly. And I never went over what I had. So when I started Sinclair Method, I was at like 20 to 30 drinks a week. I never went over that amount while doing the Sinclair Method. And I took it every time. I took Naltrexone every time, and I waited an hour every time. And I never felt panicked during that hour that I had to wait, or like, oh my God, I need to get a drink in me right now. It was never like that. And it kind of, like I said, at the point when I had to start, I felt like I had to start drinking, right? It became that, not, all right, good, it's time for a drink. Thank goodness. I set a timer and it just went off. It wasn't like that. It was, okay, well, now I guess I should have a drink. But I still had that kind of bingey habit where I take it all down in one day, or 2 days.
Can I ask you the bingey habit? Because I see that with people where they are reducing their drinking, but then when they do drink, they're drinking way more than they want. So can you tell us more about that experience and kind of what insights you've gleaned from the habit, or why that behavior was happening?
I wonder sometimes, I have wondered if it's because my intention was to become abstinent, not to drink like a normal person. Like my intention wasn't to now create a life for myself where I could go out and have drinks with friends sometimes. That ship had kind of sailed for me. I didn't want to do that anymore. I really wanted to not wrestle with alcohol in any way, shape, or form. So my experience, I don't know. I've heard people speaking in the daily meetings who are struggling with it. With that, like, it's not really turning me into a quote unquote normal drinker. I'm still kind of acting a fool and drinking too much when I drink. I don't know. I had faith that it would work because I really believed in the science, and I knew the average time that it took most people to reach pharmacological extinction. And you've clarified the difference between that and abstinence on your channel, and not pharmacological abstinence being, I really don't even think about it anymore. That switch has been flipped back. Those pathways dwindled into nothing and died, and other stronger ones took their place. Because when I stopped drinking, things started to come to the surface that I really enjoyed doing, and I had the brain power and the interest in doing it. I had the interest in learning about really what was going on with me and the rest in the world in general. Like started to enjoy new hobbies and things like that too. But I don't know if the binge piece was like rushing through it, or because I knew if I had, my experience had shown me in the past that if I bought a 6-pack and didn't finish it all in one day and still had 1 or 2 left over the next day, which never really happened, that I would start drinking then, start with those 2, and then that would set me off for the rest of that day then. So I wonder if it might have to do with that habit.
That's really interesting.
I don't know. I would like to speak to people and hear more, and I who have had the experience of pharmacological extinction, yet they still drink. I just can't be bothered with it anymore. Like, not drinking is preferable to me. It just happened organically. It happened because I took Naltrexone and did the Sinclair method, and it worked. So
yeah, it kind of makes me think, like that binge type behavior. It kind of makes me think if like we've got a plate full of food and we're just in this habit of always finishing, even though it's 30% more than we need to be full, we'll just eat it anyway. I wonder, because that sounds like it's a little bit of what you're speaking to, like just finish it all, get it done, and then you don't have to think about it. So it's really interesting.
I mean, there were even times, this is before I started the Sinclair method, where I'd buy a 6-pack or something and I'd start drinking it, and then I'd like take the last 2 bottles out to like some street corner and set them on the corner for someone to take, because I didn't want them in my house, but I couldn't dump them. God forbid you dump those. Yeah, I mean, I think the Sinclair method is so fascinating. As simple as it is, it's so fascinating. And I obviously, it has changed my life. I can't, like I said, I had struggles during it. But I didn't have struggles with the method in and of itself. Like, staying compliant was all right, was fine. I didn't struggle with side effects, like I said. I guess I did have like extra bad hangovers. I've heard people talking about that when they drink on naltrexone and their hangovers were extra bad. That had started happening before I did the Sinclair method. I had already started having those hangovers that last 2 or 3 days, you know. So I didn't equate that with any kind of side effect. Any struggles I had with the Sinclair method were really more struggling against some deeply ingrained beliefs that I knew intellectually not to be true, but that had gotten in there.
Like the stuff you learned from AA?
Yeah. Yes. And yes, like that abstinence only. You're playing with fire. Your disease is out in the parking lot doing push-ups, don't you know? And it's like, it's not a specter out in the parking lot doing push-ups. And if it is, I better be doing some push-ups too, instead of sitting on my butt and eating donuts and drinking bad coffee. But yes, that stuff did get in there. And I remember feeling those first few days, the first time I went to rehab, like this little tiny shamed child. And then they try to say to you, well, shame is your problem though. And it's like, well, then stop triggering it, please. Or validating it by telling me things like, you just don't know what you're talking about. You know, I didn't get a lot of encouragement and validation. I felt that if I told people about it, going back to why I didn't talk to people about it, that they would give me pushback, and that I really didn't have the wherewithal to fight back, because A, it's none of their business, and B, I'm not a scientist. So if you're really interested in this program, watch this documentary when you're not all judgy towards me about it. You know, I felt like I got some judgment from people. And
even if they're well-meaning, they can give judgment,
yes,
like, oh, you're fine, or, you know, because a lot of people have shame around their own drinking, or in the back of their mind, they're like, maybe I'm drinking problematically, or they want you to just join them in their fun. So I know what you're talking about exactly.
and the interesting piece about AA is, if I was relapsing regularly, which I was, people were like, but are you still going to meetings though? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, okay, good. And I'm like, no, man, that whole definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That also applies to trying the same recovery program over and over again, expecting different results.
Yeah.
It doesn't just apply to drinking and whatever else you're saying.
So you were at it for 20 years, like in that system of rehab, court ordered sobriety.
And because I couldn't quit, because I didn't realize, even though I was experiencing it in my own body, I was told it was my problem, that the scientific fact of when someone is addicted to a substance, when that substance is taken away, the craving does not dissipate over time. It actually gets worse. And I had to watch the one little pill twice before I even got that message. That was like the main thing. Is like, and if that's the case, then our approach to recovery is backwards as well.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh yeah, it's true, because I remember abstinence indeed does make the heart grow fonder. When I was sitting in rehab and when I was trying to string days together, it indeed made me, and it's the human condition to want something you can't have also.
Forbidden fruit.
So it was just, I didn't have a fight in me. And I also didn't have a leg to stand on because I couldn't stop drinking. And so people are like, well, what exactly are you going to do? I think it's unfortunate that the Sinclair Method is not suggested, and I'm hoping that is changing, because people need to know about it. They need to know about it and decide for themselves if they want to do it. It's not ethical to recommend stuff that doesn't work for people and to line your pockets with the money that you get from people relapsing, and it's just,
Yeah.
It's pretty intense. And something, when I think about that, it's so disheartening to me.
Yeah.
Because I want to believe people are good people, and I think people on the front lines are. There's a lot of turnover rate though in that industry. The counselors who work in that industry, they turn over a lot. There's a reason for that, and I think it's because it's such a difficult program and it's so ineffective.
Yeah, I've heard that from counselors.
Try to help people, and they constantly are falling on their face and feeling worse and worse and worse. Yeah. That would be heartbreaking. And to be bound by your institution or your place of work's weird old-fashioned ideologies, that must be heartbreaking. So anyway, I love the Sinclair Method. It changed my life, and I really, really, really hope that things change around it. And that's why, that's honestly was the main reason I told my therapist about it, so that she had it in her toolbox. Like, you should really know about this, but also that I wanted support and to talk about my experience with it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And talking with you helped so much too. And I honestly wish that I had talked with you while I was doing it, because I think it is helpful to have coaching through it.
I think so too. And just that support. And I mean, I think what I hear from people who've done AA a lot, what they miss about it is the fellowship and the camaraderie. And hopefully we're slowly building that within the TSM community, but we really need that. I think even science supports having, group therapy or some type of support when you're trying to make this change. So
indeed, yes.
What else were you doing besides just taking the pill? Were there other mindfulness or habitual things you were becoming more aware of and trying to change alongside just taking the medication?
I'm always, to be honest with you, let's see. So one part of my story also is that the liquor stores then closed also when I live in Minneapolis, and George Floyd was murdered, and there were riots in town and things like that, and protests peaceful, but there were also some not so great things happening, and businesses had to board up, and the liquor stores closed. And I was approaching the liquor store one Sunday afternoon, and I got there and it was closed, and I was like, oh well. And normally I would have been like, oh no, what are we gonna do? And I was just kind of like, oh well. Go back home, and a month later I quit drinking, So
I love that.
And I haven't been working, so I've had a relatively stress-free time of it, because I haven't had the stress of work. That's a big stressor for me. I have a complicated relationship with money that I'm also now just starting to explore, changing that relationship. again, things have started to, my eyes have started to open to things that are like, oh, this is really interesting. Learn about this. Learn about, just learn about it with no judgments attached. Just be open-minded and learn about it. And so not working, but also collecting unemployment. And so not having the stress of being jobless. So it's been, there's been low stress there, and that's been really nice. And I've had time to spend days doing things that I really enjoy doing. Something that I've always done that's helped me is to just be physically active. I'm a jogger. And I was starting to get back on board with that on a regular schedule. I was kind of more doing it sporadically for a while, for about a year, to be honest. I also started running when I was 12. That same year I started drinking, interestingly enough. But I started to run more often. I also practice yoga, and I didn't start meditating in earnest until about 2-3 months ago. So I think that would have been really helpful. I do have kind of a high stress response and would like to work on that. Just kind of internal regulation around that. I've done some cognitive behavioral therapies. I did do regular talk therapy, but again, I didn't talk to her about what I needed to talk to her about. So that kind of doesn't, I was cognizant of, like I said, I did the tracking of my drinks, journaling. I watched your YouTube stuff, and I'm just now starting to develop habits and more rituals, like meditating in the morning, taking time for myself. I cut way back on coffee. That helped me a lot too, with stress response stuff. And I have spent a lot of time reading about, you recommended the Abstinence Myth to me, which is also, I thought was a really good book. It's a quick read, and it's a really easy read too, but it's really, really good. Educating myself on recovery methods that aren't abstinence based, harm reduction, and just, it's opened up a whole new world. It's so interesting to me. So sort of by just kind of organic process, once that craving and need and obsession for alcohol was gone, my mind was able to open up to enjoy other things and to become a more fully functioning human being. Like, yeah, now I can actually leave the house and not be like running to the train in the morning. Or part of that's because I'm not working and I'm not taking the train. But my goal is to not, run out of the house over caffeinated, running late, dog dashes out. Oh my, what am I gonna do? Just all that nonsense that takes away my energy so quickly. And looking at things objectively, trying to work on separating myself from my emotions, working with 2 therapists now, just, I mean, that's kind of, they're taking just kind of a more holistic approach and really understanding, also working with therapists to understand perhaps why I started drinking in the first place, perhaps why patterns in my life other than drinking are repeating. I wasn't willing to talk about certain things that were presented to me before by therapists. Like, I was always like, my family was totally fine. I'm the one who screwed up. Like, I need to figure out what's wrong with me. It was like, actually, things were not great at home. You weren't horrible, but you were attuned to that even as a little baby, and you have these subconscious beliefs, and you adjusted in the best way you knew how. And you have attachment issues now. You struggle, and those, patterns in my life besides drinking that repeated over and over again. That, dude, I was told in the past that, well, the reason you keep doing those things over and over again is because you're an alcoholic. And it's like, that's not why, man. That stuff started a long time ago. I started drinking because it made me feel better. Certain things, like I sucked my thumb beyond infancy. to the point where I was old enough to remember being told I had to stop. You know, I was engaged in self-soothing behaviors. My brother was too, zoned out on the television, sucked his thumb past infancy. So just really willing to take an honest, not beating myself up look at really what was going on and sorting it out.
It's amazing when you get the alcohol problem under control. Like you said, it opens up a whole new world. And like, you really mean that, because it opens up like whole new lease on life. I think I see that so often with people, where you can heal the other things that you were unaware of, or, you know, couldn't even think about touching before, because alcohol was such the huge burden in your life. So that's so amazing.
Yeah, so not to be frightened all the time.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, I want to ask you one more question, and that is, what is one thing you might tell people, or a few things, who are considering the Sinclair Method? If you have advice for people out there who struggled like you, because I think sometimes people think, oh, my relationship with alcohol is like so bad, or it's been going on for so long. They've tried other things that haven't worked, just like you, and they're afraid this method won't work. So what advice or tips do you have for people out there?
I highly recommend watching the documentary One Little Pill. And if you don't really fully understand it the first time, or if you sort of find yourself resisting it, watch it again. Sometimes it takes me a couple times with something. And really be cognizant of your blind spots around it. Like, why do I feel like this won't work? Is it really because the science is bogus? No. Or is it because confirmation bias tells me that other stuff hasn't worked in the past? And that this is my last shot, like thinking in super extremes, black and white again. And something that like I said, I felt my brain wasn't on my side, and it wasn't. So if you are going to drink anyway, I had talked to a few young people, young women about the Sinclair Method, who called me about it, kind of referred to me by someone else. And they were so hesitant to admit that they had been drinking anyway. So one of the three I spoke to had gotten Naltrexone. And I said, okay, so did you start it? And she's like, yeah. And then she's like, I said, are you drinking? She's like, no, I can't drink. And I was like, well, yeah, you can. I mean, when was the last time you had a drink? And she hesitated. It's like 3 days ago. And I'm like, okay, so you're drinking anyway. So you can actually have it work for you and not against you. So have it work for you and believe that this is going to work, because it works. I mean, it's so much more legit to have science in front of you that's so simple that explains it, than to say, I'm going to try this method that I think should work because somebody told me it should, and that if it doesn't work, it's my problem. Like, there's no reason to struggle so hard through this when only 10% of people who struggle with substance use disorder get help, and then only a very small percentage of those people actually recover through traditional abstinence methods. Why would I even buy it? Like, even that got into my head. Like, then that's the proof wasn't in the pudding for me. And it's really, really, this method works. So if you're going to drink anyway, have it work for you and not against you. And for it to work, you do have to drink on it. And then you have to have days when you don't drink, but you have those days that I didn't drink. I didn't feel like I wanted to drink. I was really happy to not be drinking on those days. So that's something I would say. Because in my experience, now again, my goal was abstinence. I did reach pharmacological extinction. I cannot speak, unfortunately, to the drinking like a normal person, going out for drinks with a friend. However, if at any time I start to drink again, which I don't anticipate, I really, really don't. Yeah. I would take an Naltrexone before I drank. it's there for you.
Yeah.
But I can't be bothered with it anymore. Like I also am reading about how the pressure to drink, it's just really not that big of a deal. Like it's such a silly, don't even, like there are a lot of books that help me through that. Like drink like, sorry, it's called Quit Like a Woman.
Drink like a woman.
Not Drink Like a Woman, although that's part of it. Quit Like a Woman by Holly Whitaker was really helpful for me around, and This Naked Mind was also helpful. The Abstinence Myth was great. I'm currently reading The Cure for Alcoholism, so I can't speak too much to that book too. But if you're gonna drink, make it work for you, not against you. And it doesn't have to be agonizing and awful. You also don't have to worry about going through withdrawal because your body does it for you naturally when you do the Sinclair Method. You don't have to be medically withdrawn, gone through withdrawal. You don't have to agonize through this experience. And there's nothing wrong with you if a program that doesn't really work for most people doesn't work for you. There are other ways, and you have agency. You can speak up for yourself, and what you want does matter. You don't just want to drink all the time. You want to get better. Otherwise, you wouldn't be even talking about it or thinking about it. Being told that, well, you obviously don't want to get better. If you're not quitting, you're in denial. You're this, you're that. No, there's just something missing. And I know it, and you don't like that. So I would recommend educating yourself about it. Reading, for me, like I said, educating myself was the first step, but I knew it probably wasn't enough and that I needed some pharmacological help, to actually, I kind of was like, man, I'm too old now. This has been going on forever. And by the way, I have struggled for 20 years, like trudging the road to happy destiny, trudge being the operative word. It's horror. Like, it doesn't have to be that bad. If I had to make the decision every day not to drink, I wouldn't. I've been there and I wasn't able to do it.
Yeah.
For me, it's just been so much more peaceful to let the magic happen and not fight it. And also not, I hear people worrying about things that I also worried about in the very beginning. I think it's important to start taking the medication via the Sinclair Method and just kind of let it do its work for the first, what would you say, for the first?
Like at least month or a couple of
Right.
months. Just get that habit under control, because that in and of itself is doing a lot neurologically.
So much.
Yeah.
People, I think, are quick to dismiss that, maybe, and for fear, just for fear that it's not going to work for them, but that the changes happening that you may not feel are happening on a cellular level, and you're going to see them shortly.
Yeah.
And you can enjoy life. You really can. I never thought I'd feel this way about alcohol. Never. I thought I was going to struggle for the rest of my life with it.
Wow. That is so powerful. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I appreciate you so much for sharing your story. I feel like we could talk for another hour. Maybe I'll have you back on again, actually. But
I'd be happy to do it.
Okay. Thank you. It was so awesome to chat with you. Thank you
too.
for sharing, and we'll talk to you again soon.